Okay, guys, so I chose Who Was Christopher Columbus by Bonnie Bader, illustrated by Nancy Harrison, published by the Penguin Group in 2013. I chose this book because, who's more iconic in history than Christopher Columbus? Plus, it's one of my books for the reading for our assignment for our 14 books. So, I'm just going to read an insert since it's a chapter book. So, I'm going to read Chapter 2, Mapping the World. In 1476, when Christopher was 25 years old, he was on a ship attacked by French warships. The ship went up in flames, but Christopher managed to reach the shore. He was near a small fishing village in Portugal. Some villagers found him and took care of him. Christopher was happy with their help. However, he did not want to stay in a quiet village. He soon made his way to the capital city of Lisbon. For 9 years he lived in Lisbon. His brother Bartolomeo lived there too, and they opened a business together. They are map makers. This was a perfect job for a man who wanted to learn more about the world. At the docks, the brothers would meet the captains of incoming ships. They would collect information and create maps based on what the captains told them. At the map shore, Christopher heard merchants talking about trying to find a new route from Europe to eastern lands known as the Indies. Why were these merchants so interested in traveling there? Spices? Spices such as pepper, ginger, cloves, and cinnamon. People use spices in cooking to flavor food. In Egypt, Italian merchants could buy spices from the Indies. Then they sold them all over Europe for a lot of money. But if any explorer found a route directly to the Indies, he could buy up spices. There would be no need to rely on the Italian merchants. Whoever found a sea route to the Indies would grow rich from the spice trade. At that time, most people knew the world was round, but what they didn't know was how big it was. It was thought that one landmass, Europe and Asia and Africa, was surrounded by one body of water called the Ocean Sea. The only travelers so far to reach the Indies had gone by land. The description of the world written by the explorer Marco Polo told of his travels from Italy to China. Columbus read the book. He was fascinated by Marco Polo's stories of rubies as big as a man's fist and palaces with floors made of gold. Marco Polo and the Silk Road. In 1260, two brothers, Marco and Niccolo Polo, traveled east overland from Europe to China. In those days, China was part of the Mongol Empire. In 1265, they arrived in China and met the ruler, Kublai Khan. After the next 200 years, trade between India, China, and Europe grew. Merchants traveled the overland route, known as the Silk Road, and traded goods such as silk, pearls, gold, rubies, pepper, nutmeg, cloves, and tea. But the road was long and dangerous. Travelers had to cross deserts and mountains. Bandits waited to rob them of their goods. But the 15th century, Europeans desperately wanted to find another way to the Indies. Columbus was determined to be the first to sail all the way to the Indies. The King of Portugal had tried to send ships to the Indies by following a route around Africa, then east, but the ships kept turning back. The sailors said their route was too long and they did not know where they were going. But Columbus had another idea. A better idea, he thought. He would sail west to the Indies. He would sail straight across the ocean sea. Other people laughed at his plan. Sail across the ocean sea? Why, that would take months. Columbus wouldn't be able to take along enough food and water. How would he and the crew survive? Christopher had no answer for these questions, so he read more. He read book after book about traveling the world. One book said there were only 3,000 nautical miles between the Canary Islands and Japan. Japan was a place in the Indies where Columbus wanted to go. Another book about the Indies claimed there were men with umbrella-shaped feet, people with eyes on their shoulders, and creatures that were half lion and half eagle. Most people thought these stories were made up. Still, the more Columbus read, the more excited he became. Even more important to Christopher Columbus was his belief that God meant for him to make the journey to the Indies. He believed God had given him the love of the sea, God had brought him to Portugal, and God would guide him in his travels.